On a cold warehouse floor, the supervisor forces an older laborer to remove his company-issued boots in front of everyone. A forklift driver breaks protocol, gives up her own boots, and escorts the man out, risking suspension and her job. Her quiet act reveals the man's hidden medical burden and leads to small shifts in how the warehouse handles discipline and dignity. Before we get started, tap like, share, and subscribe to join the journey. And tell me, where in the world are you watching? Drop your country below. I love seeing the global trail of these stories. The foreman made it a show. He stood by the loading bay where the air ran cold and wet off the ice machine and raised his voice. "Unauthorized break. Twice," he said. He held a clipboard like a shield and kept the man in the open where the forklifts beeped and the pallets wrapped in crackling plastic made a low hiss. "Take off the boots," he said. The man stopped moving. His face had that grey stage of tired. His hands shook as he bent. He was older, narrow shoulders in a thrifted blue hoodie. He unlaced the steel toes that the company handed out on his first day and set them down like something borrowed from a neighbor. His socks were thin and already dark along the soles from the damp concrete. Phones came up, quick, then back down. Someone snorted and choked it back. The foreman took the boots and dropped them into a grey bin stenciled ISS, shoot PPE. He pulled the neon vest off the man's shoulders and tossed it on top. She was idling a forklift nearby. Forks low, engine a soft rattle. She had a radio clipped to her vest and a laminated badge with her name zip-tied to it. 2 straps of tape crossed the back of her hand from where she'd nicked her knuckle on a pallet nail that morning. She watched the man put his bare weight into his socks and flinch. They put her on a final warning last winter. It was for a near miss, a turn too fast on a wet patch, a pallet corner that grazed a waist-high stack, and shed a shower of oranges. The oranges had looked like coins scattering. No one was hurt. It still lived in her file. Red block letters underlined. 1 more, and you're out. She looked at the foreman's radio, at the security guard by the door who drifted over, black uniform, hand on his belt. At the camera bubble above the bay with a dust halo, the man in socks took a step and grounded out in the puddle left by a pallet of cut ice. He drew his toes in and made himself smaller. She cut the engine. The beep died. The gossip hum around her pulled tight. She set the parking brake and swung down. The concrete hit through her boots like a cold thought. She took 3 steps fast and didn't give herself time to think about it. She crouched, unlaced her boots, and set them in front of the man. "He needs shoes," she said. The foreman stared. The security guard blinked at her socks. She dug her toes into the ribbed cotton and felt the bone of the floor. Her toes went numb in one beat. She slid her boots toward the man and watched him hesitate. He lifted one, then the other, put them on like he was stealing, and kept his eyes on the ground. "Policy," the foreman said. He put a hand out as if to stop the boots from going away. "We can't have him walking out with company property if he slips and falls outside." He glanced up at the camera bubble. His jaw worked. He was on the clock without approval. He was told. "Then they're mine," she said. "He's borrowing mine." "You can't be on the floor without safety footwear," the security guard said. He sounded tired more than anything. He looked at her socks, the wet creeping a shade higher, and then at the grey bin with the other boots. "Write me up," she said. She stood there, socks blotting water from the concrete, and put herself between the older man and the foreman's clipboard. The man with the clipboard rubbed his temple and let out a steady breath that fogged a little in the cold strip of air by the bay. He put the pen to paper. "Name," he said. He didn't look at her face, she told him. He printed it like it hurt his wrist. He checked the box for safety violation, wrote another line for insubordination, and had security witness it. She watched him do it. The older man glanced up once, eyes rimmed, then looked down at the laces she'd left loose. Security took her badge. The guard didn't do it with a flourish. He held out a hand and waited until she unclipped the zip tie and set the badge in his palm. He pointed to the office and walked with her. The foreman had already turned away, voice rising again. "Let's keep it moving," as if volume could push crates. Inside, the office smelled like dry coffee and plastic. A heater ticked under the desk. She signed the write-up on the metal counter where other pens had dug grooves. The HR rep wasn't in, so it was just the guard, a photocopied form, and a laminated sheet of the safety rules. She had to pack her locker. She took out her lunch, a small whey drink, a folded sweatshirt, and an old picture of a dog with a graying muzzle. No one said much. She felt the concrete chill through to her ankles like a held note. In the break room, she found a clean towel. She folded it in half and set it on a chair. The older man stood in the doorway as if he needed permission to be inside. He was hugging his backpack to his chest. She nodded at the chair. "Sit," she said. He did like it was new. She got a pair of socks from the vending machine, the kind that came in a rolled tube with a paper band that said XL in block letters. She slid the tube across the table. "These will help," she said. She poured hot water into a styrofoam cup and dropped a tea bag out of habit, then took it back and swapped it for a coffee. He took the socks and looked at them like they were porcelain. He peeled his wet ones off slow. The towel drank up the water. He rubbed his toes and kept them hidden under the table, even though it was just the two of them in the room. He didn't cry. He breathed out through his nose a long time. "Name?" she asked. He told her. It was simple. She told him hers, even though he already knew by the write-up form. He nodded without looking up. "Why'd he?" She stopped. It was obvious to everyone what had happened. She tried again. "Need a ride?" He lifted a shoulder. "Us, but it's a walk." He glanced at the window where grey noon made the plastic blinds glow. "Thank you for the shoes." He tapped the toes of her boots on the tile and winced like the act of thanking hurt. Her car smelled like citrus and dust. She kept a coil of ratchet straps in the back and an old moving blanket. She draped the blanket over the passenger seat so his wet socks wouldn't soak in. The heater was slow, but the vents blew on his feet until his face unclenched a little. They drove past the empty softball fields and the chain-link fence that had a light string of plastic flags. She stopped at the gas station with the green shade and went inside. She bought a turkey sandwich in plastic and a coffee for him, a water for her. She paid cash because it felt cleaner than swiping. He took the sandwich with both hands and said, "I told him about my water pills." He said it to the windshield. When he zipped the backpack, she saw the orange bottle. It was half full, white label worn at the corners, furosemide printed in black. Next to it, a folded clinic schedule with time circled in thick marker. 2-10-15, TH 2-10-15. A handwritten note from the staffing agency paper-clipped to a time card reminds supervisors of scheduled breaks. Inside the pocket of the backpack, a small drawing done in crayon. 2 big boots and a stick figure beside them, a sun like a coin. "Daddy's work," written in a child's careful hand. He caught her eye and pushed the bottle down. He wasn't embarrassed exactly, just private. "It makes me go," he said. He tapped the clinic paper. "But I can move pallets. Just need a minute now and then." She nodded. He chewed like food was work now. They drove to a low building with faded numbers by the door. He got out with her boots. He hesitated. He took them off right there and set them on the mat by the passenger seat. He put the new socks on, snug around the ankles, toes thick. He stood in stocking feet on the asphalt for a beach that shouldn't have been beautiful, but was. He left with the sandwich in his pocket and the clinic paper folded again. He looked smaller without the boots. He turned back once and lifted a hand. 2 days later, a plastic crate appeared by the time clock. It was the same grey as the PPE bin, but this one had a handwritten sign taped to it. Extras. There were 3 pairs of old steel toes in it, sizes written on index cards. A pair of cheap sneakers sat on top with a note, "Not safety for leaving." No one said who put it there. People started adding to it. A woman from shipping dropped in a pack of socks bound with a rubber band. Someone else left those gel insoles that always came 2 to a pack. Talks started happening in the small conference room. No more walkouts on the floor. That's what the foreman said over the radio. Private office, 2 witnesses, no filming. He recited almost soft. He had a headache crease above his nose and an open bottle of ibuprofen on his desk. He didn't make a big deal. He looked at his shoes a lot. On the whiteboard by the exits, somebody wrote in block letters, "If you need a break, radio." The foreman didn't erase it. He underlined it. When a guy from night shift asked to hit the restroom, there wasn't a sigh on the channel. Just 10-4. The beep of the forklifts went on like usual. The air stayed cold. But something moved around the edges. People looked up when someone dropped a pallet. They looked, then looked away not to watch the shame. On a Friday, a stack of paper slipped under the safety poster. It was a copy of the discipline policy with a new sticker, "No PPE confiscation at exit. Provide temporary footwear if needed." A box of disposable shoe covers appeared under the bench. They ripped easy, but it was something. The security guard started keeping a spare pair of boots under his desk. She stayed home for 3 days, suspended pending HR review. It came in a tight email full of investigate and policy. Her check would be short. She stared at the wall where the dog picture hung and felt the hit in her chest like a dropped pallet. She folded towels. She watched a game show without seeing any of it. When she went back in, she kept her head down. No parade. The foreman nodded at her and didn't call her into the office. The guard handed her badge back. He didn't say welcome or don't do that again. He slid the clip across the table and his eyes met hers for a second before he moved on to the next thing. On her first break, a kid from packing walked by and left a rolled pair of socks on the table in front of her without looking, white with grey toes. No, he kept walking. She put them in her lunch bag and didn't say thanks out loud. At the bay, a temp stood by the lift and stared at the crate of spare shoes. He picked up a pair and looked around like alarms would go off. "Take them," she said, passing. He did. He smiled with only his eyes. She thought about the wet prints he left. The man's socks had made a trail on the warehouse floor that day, dark ovals that thinned and then disappeared by the door. She'd watched them fade. Now, at the end of a long shift, she sat in her car and held her feet to the heater. Her own socks steamed on the dashboard, damp turning to heat under the late light. Outside, the loading bay spilled a strip of sun across the concrete, and it lit up the stack of extra boots by the wall-scratched steel toes in a crooked line, all of them facing out.